Chris. Thanks so much for joining us today for this JumpCloud Partner interview. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the invite. Always happy to speak about JumpCloud.
Excellent. Well, so am I. So let's kick off with finding out a little bit about you and your MSP.
My name's Chris Pearson. I'm the CEO. I used to be managing director, but I think everyone calls themselves a CEO these days. I don't know why. Um, I run a company called The Light. We're a managed service provider. We've been going for 20 years or so now in various different guises, always called The Light. It was originally set up when basically I didn't want to work anymore for anyone else, and I saw an opportunity. It was a time when everyone was starting to get a computer on their desk, and I realised that there wasn't many people in sort of small, medium-sized businesses that would have their own IT manager or really knew what to do in terms of managing technology. So I saw that there was a gap in the market there. And so I started working for the company that I used to work full time for, and then started building up customers from then.
Great. And I don't normally ask this, but I feel like I should this time. And
Oh,
where did
okay.
the name come from? It's quite an
Do you
interesting
know?
name
Do you
for an
know what
MSP.
I do? Sort of. Yes. Well, I wanted something that could be sort of post-rationalized, so it wouldn't be like, Chris's IT services. I wanted something where it'd be like, oh, the light, what do they do? And you could go into different directions from doing that. And I don't know. I'm not sure I'm the one who came up with that, but I seem to remember that when I was doing some sort of name generation, I used to work for a brand consultancy, so it's quite a thing to do in the late 90s and early 2000s to come up with like names for things, and it was never always going to be something typically IT. And it fits in as well. Sort of a lot of our clients and some of our previous clients as well were more in the creative industry, so they're not looking for something like Chris's IT services, or we plug your computers in, that type of thing. They were looking for something that felt a bit cooler, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, no, that's why it does stand out. That's why I asked the question, because you say it's quite easy to create Chris's IT services or whatever, and that's what a lot of the MSPs have gone down. So it's nice
We
to
did
stand
have the
out.
problem at the beginning that people thought we were some sort of cult. So we'd be like, we used to have a website called thelight.org was our first domain address. So it's like, are you the light? What do you do? What are you at the light? Have you seen the light? All these sort of things. So it has caused some confusion for people because people don't make the link. But yeah,
No,
it's a good
but
bit of
you got
fun.
there. Okay, well, you touched upon this slightly. I don't know whether it's still the case, but around sort of a typical client of the light. Do you have a typical client, or do you work or
Ye-
particular vertical?
Yeah, we don't now we don't have a typical just one vertical that we specialize in, but historically we've worked with lots of agencies based in central London. So by an agency we mean people who do usually creative services, so architecture companies, design companies, brand consultancy, advertising companies. That tends to be, and that was an intro really to JumpCloud because most of our clients were either heavily Mac based or 50-50. So we had to have technologies that supported both.
Okay, well, that jumps in to the just sort of jumping around the questions here a little, but it leads nicely into this one around how did you initially hear about JumpCloud then?
I think it was I think I was really stuck on the Mac side of it because Apple, as you probably know, that they sort of dip in and out about what they're going to decide how they're going to support Mac. So they're very happy to support personal Macs, but when it comes to that business level, they're like, no, I'm not really interested. So we were looking for something that would help us manage the Macs in terms of usernames and passwords and Windows machines, and also Office 365 and Google Workspace as well. So most people tend to be like Office 365 and Windows, or they're Google and Mac or something else. But we do all four of them, and the split's pretty much equal. So we needed technologies that were able to support all of those. So we did some searching, and then JumpCloud came out from some forum somewhere, and at the time you were able to test JumpCloud with 10 free users, and so we did that internally for us, and we liked some of the stuff that we saw, and we went from there.
Okay, so you've sort of started out internally just to sort of kick the tires and
Yeah,
play with it.
just to see what was going on with it. Yes.
Okay, and it's interesting. You mentioned you kind of answered the question without me asking it, but you mentioned that you're working with Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 and across Windows and Mac devices. I mean, a lot of MSPs are currently kind of, as you mentioned, kind of are very much in the Microsoft camp across clients and productivity services. But you've kind of been sort of upfront with using all those combinations from day one.
Yeah, I think so. It always felt it historically we had a couple of big Mac clients, and it felt wrong to be able to say, hey, you must get a Microsoft server, an Exchange server, you must use Windows. Because to be honest, depending on what it works reasonably well, Office 365 with Mac now. But Active Directory is still not brilliant with it, and it's still not great in my opinion. So it felt wrong to try and force a solution just because we were then able to standardize around that, and that we did get some pushback from clients, and so we didn't try and go down that route. So we had a situation where our Windows clients were mainly on Office, were on what it was Active Directory then and Office, and our Mac clients were just out on their own. So they might have had Office 365 or they might have had Google, but they didn't have anything to bind the individual user accounts or the machines together.
So from a JumpCloud perspective, how does the offering to your clients differ from if they're in that sort of fully Microsoft to the Google Workspace world?
Well, that's what's so great now. So we don't have to have that decision. So every client we have and every user we have that's a full user has a JumpCloud account, and then we either bind it to Google Workspace or we bind it to Office 365 and we bind it to a Mac or a PC. If they already have Azure AD, or if they have an old Active Directory, then the functionality in JumpCloud allows you to operate that way. But we try and make it so that we say, look, hey, we will migrate you away from Active Directory and use JumpCloud. And we just say, look, if you stop working with us or you don't want to use JumpCloud, it's very easy to part those services so other people can do that. And I think that's a really important bit, because I think MSPs traditionally have hooked their clients in, and mean, like, if you've gone that, so you go down that Microsoft route or you go down that Mac route. And the reality is, and what's changed, we think, over the past few years is that, lots of people might have like a Windows machine at home, and they might have Mac in the office, or they might have an iPad, or they might have an Android tablet or an Android phone. And we think MSP should be supporting the user, and what the user loses, not we will support machines that are only bought from that computer. So that's why I think with JumpCloud, it really works for us to be able to say, hey, we're looking after the user and how the user connects, not are you Office. I don't want it to be that sort of binary choice between you either Microsoft or Apple. They have to interoperate these days.
Yeah, terrific answer, and I totally agree. So kind of just jumping on the back of that, if you were speaking to another MSP that was maybe looking at JumpCloud or wanting to look at JumpCloud, and maybe currently operates in a Windows world, or probably currently turns away Google Workspace business, I mean, what sort of piece of advice would you give them to maybe sort of take the plunge with JumpCloud, or to modernize their MSP in some way?
I would suggest that I'm sure that I would hope that, out of all of their clients, I'm sure that they would have some people who have some Macs, or they have someone who is on Google Workspace. And I would just be upfront with clients and say that, we're a Microsoft shop, but we can do both. And I think JumpCloud allows you to do that. And if you don't have JumpCloud, then you don't have that security about being able to manage those users. So I think that with the JumpCloud and how it interoperates with Active Directory, and I can't remember the wording that you guys use, but it's a very sort of soft approach that you can glue all these systems essentially together, or you can take them apart in that way. So I would say that I do think it is difficult. If you're an MSP and your staff are of one particular skill set, they may not want to move. But hey, we could have had this conversation 15 years ago, and when people were like, nobody's going to be using nobody's going to be using Google Workspace. No, hey, everyone hates the interface. Lots of people still do. Nobody's going to move away from the Outlook, but the world changes and we move along. And to think that people will be working in the same way in 5 years' time to as they are now, I think is really naive. And I think companies like JumpCloud have sort of seen that and said that actually we're going to take a bit of a punt on this and say that the future in 5 years' time wouldn't be deciding what Microsoft have decided to do, or even Google have decided to do. But people, and we see it in front of us now, people in their jobs take applications and SaaS systems from everywhere, and the job is to sort of integrate them together. So I'm not telling anyone how to run their MSPs, and there's people who run lots better MSPs than I run. So, but I would say just be a bit open, because the world is changing in that way.
Yeah, and I see a parallel, and obviously you've been doing this for 20 years, but I do see a little bit of parallel with Mac support, because a few years ago, I know MSPs would turn away Mac support completely. But
Yes.
they can't do, I guess now that's a very difficult thing to do, because Macs are in the workplace, like it or not. Macs are in almost
Yeah.
every organization is going to have Macs. And so MSPs have had to find a way to manage Macs in some capacity. I'm not sure they always do a great job, but they try to manage them. And I think the same is probably happening with Google. And this is another question, I guess. Then you mentioned over time you've seen sort of the evolution of Google. I know when I speak to partners in the US, they're seeing Google's huge in education now, the workspace suite.
Yeah.
And so people are coming into the workplace knowing how to use Google. Startups are starting up predominantly using Google from day one. Is that a trend that you're seeing in Europe as well?
Yeah, I think we definitely see it in terms of people not being wedded to their desktop. So the advantage would always with Google be about, hey, look, you can have 50 gigs of worth of email, and if you want to search for something, you can do it in a second. We've all, anyone who's old enough, I wouldn't say you're as old as me, Chris, but anyone who's been around this for a long while will realize that, using Outlook and just relying on it in its local database to search through old data, people are just a lot more comfortable, not necessarily just with Google, but just using cloud-based systems. And I think that you could put this parallel for MSPs as well. People are more comfortable about moving between applications than they once were. They're more comfortable about moving between MSPs. When I first started doing this, nobody would change MSPs. It's like you have the keys to everything. Nobody knows how to do that. Now, it's a lot easier to change. It's a lot more transparent in a good way. So it's a good opportunity for us as MSPs to get new business, and it's an opportunity for clients, if they're not happy with their MSP, to move away.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I suppose in answer to your question, yeah, we're definitely seeing that trend. It's not something that I think that one of the other things that is not really mentioned is, like, the MSP is no longer the center point for making technological decisions about what they're doing. So a lot of these things about whether they're Google or whether they're Office are driven by the business and the people who use that business. And it used to be, back in the day, it used to be something that IT departments or MSPs could drive forward, but now everyone knows a bit more about whether they like something. And so they're often driving that, saying, look, we've made a decision that we want to change our file storage to Office 365 from Google because we like the way it works, or we want to move to Box or to Dropbox. And so they're driving that. And so the MSPs have to sort of react to that rather than saying, okay, we don't support that, we're not doing it.
No, that's really thought-provoking. It's got me thinking about several things. One of which, and I have been in the game a long time, as you mentioned, is around that IT department or the MSP sort of mandating what people use. You had to have a BlackBerry, for example, if you wanted remote email. It had to be on Exchange. You had to use this. You had to use that. Whereas I think the sort of consumerization of IT, as I probably call it, in terms of people are used to now, if they want to do something, they can just get an app for it. They can sign up to a SaaS solution for it. People are much more aware that they can just create you just find tools to solve particular problems and move between the two, which I guess does create another problem for MSPs, which is around this sort of app sprawl or shadow IT and all that, what that brings in.
I think that's really, I think you're right. What was it you said, that you like the consumerization of IT, and I think that's right. And I think that I've sort of changed my view on this in the past few years. I sort of welcome that now, and I think that something like JumpCloud and what we do, our job is to put a wrap around that. You were talking about like the shadow IT and everything else. The people doing their jobs, they might find tools that we have no, we look in the design industry and everyone thinks, oh, Adobe, but there are lots of other tools out there that that smart young people who are in this area, there's some great tools that do something that's really helpful for their particular roles that, support staff that we have wouldn't know how to use them. So instead of saying you can only use tools that we recommend or that you can buy through us or whatever, it's like all we ask now is like that we have sort of quarterly check-ins and say, what are you guys doing in your job? So we have to really know what our clients are doing. And then they might say, okay, we've got this app and we're doing that. And it's like, okay, we we're happy for that. If you're happy with that, you do that, you purchase that. But where we want to help out is we want to include that in the onboarding and the offboarding. We want to include that in MFA and single sign-on. We want to put that wrap around for you. We're not trying to take that software away from you. We welcome the fact that you know your business and what you're trying to do better than we do. And then, but the things that you don't know about that we do around security for IT, around onboarding and offboarding. And I think that that's something, it just means that it needs to be, it's less cookie cutter these days. You can have a process for taking these on, but trying to control that whole process of every piece of hardware, every piece of software that a company does it feels completely outdated. And the world that we live in, we're on a Zoom call now. That wouldn't have happened under the old way IT was done.
No, it's interesting. And I think, again, it's partly I know in the creative industry, especially, well, in industry in general, it's such a competitive market for staff. So if you're kind of saying to people that new starters, they may say, I want to use a Mac and I want to use these products. If you can say, well, no, you're not doing that. You've got to run on a Windows machine running this. They could probably say, well, I'll go work somewhere else. I guess there's got to be a kind of element of choice, allowing choice, user choice for the applications and the devices they use to get their job done.
We're definitely seeing that as well from some of those applications. When you think about it, if someone's going to be working completely remotely, from an IT point of view, the things that are binding people there are, what is that experience when that computer comes? What are the systems they work on? How are people communicating? So I think companies that we're seeing, the ones that we think are sort of quite cutting edge, they're taking that on board, and they're being really, they're saying, okay, look, you can choose whether you've got Mac or PC and what device you want and systems you want. Here's your budget. You're going to be working in the office half the time or not half the time. And so they're giving users that, like you say, that consumerization, they're giving them that choice. Because most of the tools that they're using, it doesn't matter what they're on.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to the clients that you've got using JumpCloud, I mean, which portions of the products are you using? Do you use the whole suite, or are you using individual sort of components?
Pretty much the whole suite. The original one was, again, I think the core for us when we did this was around onboarding. So we want a new person we want to top and tail it for onboarding and offboarding. So when someone's onboarded, that is the hook into Google or Office or shared apps that they're going in and how they log onto devices. So we wanted to make that, so that device, binding to the device was quite important for Mac and PC. Binding to the core services, whether that's Google or Office 365, was key. What we've done now since the product has moved on and the service has moved on is that we've managed to get rid of our RMM for the Mac and our RMM for the Windows, and we're now using JumpCloud's RMM because it just makes sense. It's all built in, and it doesn't have every feature that the other RMM does, but that's more than made up for the fact of it all being integrated and all working really well. So as an example, things like managing MDM, you used to have something that was, you used to have a Mac specialist product that would manage MDM and updates. And now you can do that directly in JumpCloud. And then from the Windows side, you can manage that instead of managing it through Intune or something else, you're managing it through JumpCloud as well. So that ease of use is wonderful. So that workflow for us is that we can add any device that we want, we can add any user we want or any client we want, and it goes through the same funnel. So it has allowed us to, with the flexibility of the product, mean that we can support more devices and more users in a more uniform way. And the user experience is good. In terms of the actual applications, we've just started to do user access management. We're looking more and more of our applications we're putting through single sign-on, that we're doing that. We just used to do the core ones, but now we're doing more and more. And some of the things that So for instance, JumpCloud Protect, in terms of the mobile app, we've used that and rolled that out really simply. It's a really nice bit of kit that we've started to do and replace we were using Authy before. So we've managed to more and more standardize around the tools that you've got, because the ones that we've seen that have been developed are of really good quality and really smart. And there's one that we're currently rolling out to clients, and it's taken a bit longer than we would have hoped, which is a JumpCloud Password Manager. And that's not the fault of the software. It's the fault that everyone who logs on and saves their password in different browsers, they might have 7 or 8 devices. So it's quite time intensive. The technology is there, but the actual process for us in terms of rolling out is a bit more hand holding than like centralized deployment.
Yeah, and I come from the password management world, and it's not an easy sell to anyone. No one likes password managers at the best of times, so it's tough.
So you have to make it really smooth for them. It has to be on all of their devices, otherwise it's no good. And you have to just make it super simple for them, so that they have the trust that if you've got a 16-digit complex password, that they'll never have to remember it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Have you looked at the sort of passwordless stuff in JumpCloud Go or anything like that
Yeah,
yet?
we've just started looking at that, and that's something that, Google are very much down that route as well. So it's something that we see happening, and we just don't want to, until we've rolled out password manager everywhere, we don't want to sort of jump ahead of people, because because then they'll start saying, can't this all be password, like it is for under JumpCloud Go? So yeah, that's definitely in our plans over the coming year.
No, well, I'm glad you're enjoying the product and sort of using the main sort of components of it, which is really good. And it's also great to hear that we're ticking a lot of the boxes, which is something that we wanted to do when we're creating the product for MSPs, is to sort of help chip away at those, multiple products and sort of help reduce a bit of tech sprawl and bring a bit more into control. So it's great to hear
I
that we're
think
doing that.
we have like the opposite problem, and I think this is for lots of sort of progressive partners, is because the speed of software development is fast these days, and the speed and the quality of deployment is good. There wasn't really a role in MSPs before to keep track of these tools. It used to be you would have someone like a centralized service who'd be like, your job is on all of the endpoints is to get antivirus and everything else. Now, we can't deploy a lot of the features that you've got, because we have to test them. Is it worth our time doing them? Is it going to provide value to the clients, etc.? So there is a sort of role that's developed within MSPs, or the MSPs that I've seen, is about who's keeping on top of these tools that we're using, because there's some great stuff there that can show real value to our clients that they're not going to be charged extra for, but we think they're really valuable. And I would put something like a password manager in there, because previously I wouldn't have gone around to my clients and, for whatever it was, it's like a couple of quid per user. It just wasn't worth the time. But if it's already built into what they've got and it integrates, and we can help improve their security at the same time, it's sort of we're diverting some of our time and attention to something else that we can give them for free, essentially.
No, that's a great final thought in terms of, again, once it got me thinking about that particular role, because I know JumpCloud do sort of quarterly partner webinars where we kind of say what's new, what's developed, and we're throwing all this stuff out, expecting MSPs to sort of deploy it. But it's not just JumpCloud. You've probably got multiple vendors saying the same thing, different services. And when does the MSP get to stop and say, well, what should we be deploying?
Well, again, and I think that's for MSPs, that's an internal process about what you do. I think that in the past, the temptation was like, oh, there's a new product that does this thing. Let's get that new product and we'll build it in. And I think now people should just look at what is that core, what are the core tool sets that you're using, and really making sure that you're happy with the vendors you've got and you really utilize all they've got, because everyone's doing webinars, everyone's doing training, everyone has internal resources that help you use the product. And I have to say the JumpCloud stuff on that is excellent. We were given really great resources, not just a couple of PDFs about how we were going to deploy JumpCloud Password Manager. There was proper hand holding and making us aware. And we see, I think, to get real value out, vendors like yourself are giving lots to MSPs because they realize that's their growth model. But also, I think it's up to MSPs to take advantage of these openings that you're giving and give feedback to the product. And you're the ones who are not seeing the end clients about how it's using, and we're the ones who have to sort of help you and tell you what we're seeing and how we're implementing, how we're using those tools. So I think there is definitely something MSPs can be doing to help in that sort of cycle that they're not doing at the moment.
Yeah, 100% agree. And hopefully that's something that MSPs can work on and vendors can help with, because obviously it's a complicated problem. But with
Absolutely.
that, thanks so much for your time, Chris. I really enjoyed chatting. Thanks again for your sort of continued partnership with JumpCloud, and yeah, hopefully speak soon.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you to you and your team, and keep up the good work. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.